And I am personally excited to hear the insights from the 2025 Bank of America study on philanthropy. And I hope that each of you leaves here today with a nugget or two that you can apply back to your work, advising, or your own giving. And so with that, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce a dear friend and partner. Please join me in welcoming Fabiola Brumley, Palm Beach County President and Vice Chairman of Business Banking at Bank of America, to say a few words. Fabiola, the floor is yours.
So much, Danita. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you, and I want to welcome you to this very special afternoon. I know many of you that are here today, and the topic and the person were very, very attractive to all of you, so much so that it was sold out very quickly, and so it was going to be standing room only. I heard many people say, gosh, I tried to get in, I tried to register, and it was too late. So let me know if you can bump somebody off so I can attend. So again, I welcome all of you, and you know, I stand here on behalf of my 1,000 or so teammates, and that includes Bank of America, Merrill, and the private bank, and all of us are just so interested in what you all are going to do with the information you're going to hear about today, because it really is going to require some actions on your part. Just a little bit, we are thrilled to always partner with the Community Foundation of Palm Beach and Martin counties. They do amazing work, and so we're delighted to bring you today the 2025 study that has been in place now. This study has been in place for almost 20 years. It's a biannual study. Our speaker will talk a lot more about it, and she can speak from a place where she not only has been consulting in philanthropy for decades, but she really understands both from a internal standpoint, but really knows how to interpret survey data. Oftentimes we read surveys and we really don't understand how to interpret them and how to convert them into action. So we're going to hear about that today. So I know we're all going to be inspired, so I'm really glad I'm not following her, so I get to introduce her. So, as Managing Director and National Philanthropic Strategy Executive at Bank of America, Dianne Bailey leads a team that advises some of the most influential philanthropists and nonprofit organizations in the country. Her work has been featured in Axios, Barron's, Fortune, the Washington Post, and the New York Times. She's a TEDx speaker. If you haven't heard that, you'll get a feel for that while she's up here, because she is a fierce optimist and a passionate advocate for women's philanthropy. She's currently serving as chair of the Women's Philanthropy Institute National Council. She's a graduate of, everybody thinks she's a UNC grad because she is a North Carolinian, yes. Is that right? Yes. Yeah, she's lived in Charlotte for over 25 years, but she's actually a graduate of University of California, Berkeley, with honors, and cum laude from Georgetown University Law Center. She holds the Certificate of High Impact Philanthropy from the University of Pennsylvania. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, hold on. Let me tell you a very important thing, because compliance would kill me if I didn't say this, even though she's an attorney, and she has practiced law, and she has tremendous legal insights, but she does not provide legal advice. I know that's in her role at Bank of America. She is, we love having her here. I have an office for her here in Palm Beach County. Even though she's not here, she knows she can move here anytime. So please join me in welcoming Dianne.
Grateful to be here today. It's like I have this national role, and like you don't pick a favorite child, you're not supposed to pick a favorite market, but it is true. I'm here in Palm Beach a lot because I love it. The best people are here, amazing work happening in the community, and thank you for joining us today to hear about the findings from our new research. They are revelatory. So I put together what I think of as sort of the advanced placement version of this deck. And so we're gonna fly. Please Any questions, comments, commentary, like jump in. I will also save some time at the end for some Q&A. I will hang out a little bit longer if there's more you want to talk about now, of course. So just so I know who's in the room, I know many of you because as we've established, I know a lot because it's the best. By show of hands, who is on staff, a professional at a nonprofit organization? Okay, amazing, amazing. How about board members? And you can raise your hand more than once. Okay, board members, got a lot of board members. Donors, anyone here a donor? I better see every hand go up. Every hand go up. So let's just dive right in. So as Fab already mentioned, this is the 10th edition of a 20-year longitudinal study. We do this research with the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, so it is rigorous academic research. So who do we mean when we say affluent? When we talk about affluent donors, the people who are allowed to respond to our survey are accredited investors. So that means you either have $200,000 in income or you have $1 million in assets, not including the value of your primary residence. Okay, that's an accredited investor. That's the minimum point of entry. Now what comes back is substantially higher. What you'll see on this slide is the mean. So on average, it's 24 million in assets or over 570 in income. Now, for my data geeks, any other philanthropy like nerds out there, like me? Anyone with me and me like all in the data? Thank you. You're my people. You're my people here. All right. So the median is a lot less. The median is let's see, 2 million in assets and 300,000 in income. So substantially lower. I want you to have this in your mind because this is not a billionaires research report. This is a mass affluent research report. You're roughly the top 7% in terms of income and wealth, which is who we're all relying on to meet our fundraising goals. Now, we love when a billionaire lands in our pocket. I mean, any Mackenzie Scott grantees in the room? I mean, amen. Love Mackenzie Scott. But you know, that's not the typical. That's not the typical. I will say, in particular to my professional teammates that are here, think about this presentation as equal parts therapy and sermon, okay? So there will be a few opportunities for an amen from the crowd. All right, so taking a step back, what we know about philanthropy overall is that almost $600 billion is given to nonprofit organizations every year. It is very significant, very significant. And of that, 81% comes from individuals and families, right? 81%. At Bank of America, thanks to Fab's leadership and her team, Stephanie, they do an amazing job publicizing the work that we do. I mean, and as a company, we give over $300 million every year into charitable organizations. It is not insignificant. However, all corporate philanthropy combined, grants, sponsorships, and in kind, is only 7%. 7% comes from bequests alone from individuals. So when you are looking to staff your organization's development team, over-indexing on corporate and foundation can be a miss because really the money is coming from individuals and families. Wealthy individuals give 10 times more than the general population. They have the means to do so. Just a representation of that. Okay. There's some good news and some bad news in this research. I am on record as being a fierce optimist. So I'm going to be looking for that glass half full. But here's the bad news. We're just going to get this out of the way. We're just going to check this off the list. Declining donor participation rates. It's real. It's real. With this graph, if you were to stretch it all the way back to 2006, so before the Great Recession, right? At that point, the affluent donors, 98% of them were giving. 98%. Everybody practically. And likewise with the general population, 2/3 of them were giving every year. Now, as you'll see on the chart, we're down to 81%, so 4 and 5. So still the vast majority, 4 and 5, from the affluent, and 47%, less than half of the general population, making even one contribution to a charitable organization. And yet, the amount given overall does continue to inch up with the economy. And so what we know is that the donors are up, the dollars are up, but the donors are down. So increasingly relying on a smaller and more affluent circle of donors. So we know that wealthy people are not a monolith, right? So we do a deeper dive into these different identities. And there are just three things I would say about this slide. Thing number one is don't try to stereotype. They're all generous. Everybody's generous, okay? What I want you to notice, the other two things are look at the difference between the likelihood of a woman to give and a man to give. 8 points more likely, right? Women are substantially more likely to be donors. I could go on a whole, you've heard me. I did a whole hour with Jeannie Sager on women's leadership and philanthropy. One thing I'm gonna say is that the future of philanthropy is female, and the future is now. Women already make or influence 85% of all giving decisions. Most, like all consumer decisions, 85% made or influenced by a woman. In the great wealth transfer, we will talk about the rising generation. But keep in mind, before the money goes to the millennials and the Gen Z, there is a young boomer or a Gen X woman standing in the way, right? If you have a male partner, women are on average 2 years younger than their male partner, and they live on average 5 to 7 years longer. So there's a good decade in there, almost, where the woman is going to be making some of those ultimate decisions, in particular around plan giving, which is a huge opportunity. Any advancement professionals, any board members, anybody taking notes, plan giving, all caps, star it, get a highlighter out, whatever you need to do. It's absolutely essential. Women are key to that as well. Okay, so women, substantially more likely to give. The other thing I want to point out to you is this younger donor. So remember, we define younger as millennial and Gen Z, these younger donors. Yes, they're giving less right now than older people are giving. It's understandable. They've got a lot of competition for their dollars. Maybe paying off student debt, maybe saving to buy the first home. Childcare costs alone can really stress out these younger families, okay? But 7 in 10 are already giving. And there are other data points that tell us in the research that didn't quite make this deck, because I had like 150 slides to choose from. And we aren't going to be here all day. Where they tell us there's other indicators. Trust me, this generation is supposed to be wildly generous. And they're just warming up to it, Of the 33,000 on average, it gets spread across 5 organizations. Particularly with women, they're more likely to have a wide number of organizations they support. In particular, right, I remember Deb Mesh was the old chair that did this data, and I was telling her about myself as a donor, and she just laughed. She's like, you are like our stereotype, because we're relational, right? And so we give to things that other people support just because we care about them. So the women drive that average number up. But don't judge a woman's capacity by the check you're getting, right? Because other research from the Women's Philanthropy Institute on life satisfaction in giving says that when women give more, they're more joyful in their giving. It's usually because there's a volunteer connection, but know that women can and will do more for you if you engage them in the right way. All right, so we talked about who's giving. We'll talk more about who's not giving, but let's talk about where they're giving. What causes are they prioritizing? I'm going to show you this research, again, I'm all in the weeds on this stuff, in a few different ways. The first slides are incidence of giving, so popularity. $10 gift, $1 million gift, they look exactly the same. But it's still relevant to see where people's interests are. and creates pipeline also. So this is the first. So you'll see basic needs, religion, health, and then like a great muddy middle, right? Where everything gets roughly, in the teens, the low 20s, arts and culture, higher education, animals, like these causes are popular, right? Most giving is local. Am I right?
Yes.
Most giving is local. And community foundations are such an important incubator for the ideas, conveners for the donors, capacity building for the nonprofits in the community. Community foundations are essential, lifeblood to philanthropy. So really applaud and celebrate your leadership and your entire team. Amazing, amazing. And it really responds to this desire to be proximate and to help our neighbors. Now, this is the wallet share slide. Okay, so this is proportionate giving, Giving to religion, and we define religion for purposes of our research as places of worship. So mosques, temples, synagogues, churches, places of worship, okay? Still commands the highest percentage overall, right? The lion's share. Now we know that patterns of religion are changing in the US. 30% are nuns, N-O-N-E-S, nuns. Not those, nuns. Spiritual but not religious, agnostic or atheist, okay? And we're, as a sector, paying really close attention to what's gonna happen as these patterns of religion continue to change, because benevolence is taught and practiced in all of these places of worship. So, as we look at those declining donor participation rates, you have to wonder whether changing patterns of religion are impacting the donor participation overall. But those people that are still giving to religion, they are giving to religion. I'm seeing some knowing nods in the room. 6 times larger than most of the other gifts for those that are really committed to their place of worship. And there is a bit of a redistribution effect that happens, with some of that money going out to benevolence, either in the community or even globally. The next two go back and forth. It's a little bit of a horse race between basic needs and higher education. Most philanthropy research reports look at education as a whole. We break them apart, with K through 12 and higher ed being separate, because we know they're very different genders. And higher ed really carries the day, This is showing the 2022 to 2024. Of course, we're still having a little bit of the pandemic kind of hangover effect in 2022. And also some disruption in higher ed in 2022 and as well. So, but they go back and forth. But all of these other categories, it's like, look at arts and culture. 3% of giving overall to arts and culture, right? So I've got performing arts people in the room. Raise your hand so we can give you some love. Oh, God bless you. It's hard work. I told you I was here for the therapy. It's hard work. And I think for the boards to have this information is really critical, so they understand the challenge that their professional development team has in front of them, really competing for these dollars, which are scarce. Now, there are some regional differences, and I will say that my experience of Palm Beach is that we value the arts here. And like I said, we value the arts here. But in many other communities, it's even more extreme. So this is a very, very important slide. Again, for the boards to understand, they've got to lock arms with the professional team. The professional team cannot do it on their own. Can I have an amen? Amen. Okay, all right. Okay, some giving differences by region. The only one I would really point out here is that in the Northeast, they are real into their higher ed in the Northeast. And in the South, we do love the higher power in the South. Amen. Amen. Okay, these are just some differences. The only things we shared here, so the dark blue is older and the gray is younger. We only show those areas where there's really a difference in interest. And so like basic needs isn't on here because everybody cares about basic needs. It doesn't matter how old you are. But like, look at the difference in climate is huge. Religion, look at how religion kind of falls off the ledge with the younger people. And I would also point out, let's see here, you know, the basic needs, I mean, they're both very, very high. In education, higher ed is not on here because the rising generation really does care about higher education. You know, they're mostly interested in issues, not institutions, but they still come in for their alma mater, which is great. Okay, this is the most important slide. This is it. This is the money slide. Should you like to take a picture of this slide, I will step aside. This is the one. This is the donor motivation slide. This is the why. And it is also in our report, which you will send. So don't get too crazy with it. So this is the why. We ask them, we just say, why? Like, how do you choose a cause or an organization to support? Top 3 reasons. It is all about them. Their personal values, their interests, their experiences. Their experiences. You have to come all the way down here to the second from the bottom for anything about the case for support to show up, right? Compelling pitch, 11%. And so what to take away from this, and again, advancement professionals, you understand this, but boards sometimes get a little confused. They want the 5-point strategic plan, they want to memorize it, they want, right? It's like, rubbing your temples, like, oh my gosh. Like, literally, I was working with a client that's about to launch like hundreds of millions of dollars capital campaign. And I was prepping with the director of advancement for the steering committee meeting. And I said, do not take the case for support with you. Just don't take it. Don't take the marketing materials. Don't take any of it. Because number one, it doesn't really matter. And number 2, somebody's gonna like go down the rabbit hole of the Oxford comma, and you're gonna waste an entire hour. Just don't even take it. Don't take it. Don't take it. Because fundraising, it is not sales. Fundraising is matchmaking. It's matchmaking, right? It's understanding their values, their interests, their experiences, and then matching it with the case for support for your organization. And if there's not alignment, if you can't make a match, like, lesson release, you know, let them, introduce them to another organization, right? That's gonna, because you can't tell people what to care about. And so you really are looking, again, not to sell, but to make a match. Okay, who makes the decisions? Who makes the decisions? I've already told you what percent, 85% of all giving decisions are made or influenced by a woman. And that would also be true in the inverse, right? Because most couples are at least conferring with each other. There are very few where it's yours and mine, and never the twain shall meet. And that may be true for small gifts, but when we're looking for these leadership gifts, you better believe that if you're not talking to both people in a partnered household, you are missing your opportunity. Because it takes 2 people to say yes and 1 person to say no. Okay, I'm gonna get to good news. I promise I'm gonna get to the good news in this report, because there is good news in this report. But this one's not so great. This is not so great. This is about involving family members in your giving. Like, who has kids or grandkids? Raise your hands. Who wants them to be generous? Who wants to raise generous, philanthropic children and grandchildren? All of us. All of us. All of us. And yet, you know, only 13 plus 2, because 13 involve their children and grandchildren, and 2% involve both older and younger. So call it 15%. 15%? How do you expect them to wake up and know how to be an impactful donor and how to be a committed volunteer if you're not modeling it for them? We also have this really great piece on the 5 stages of philanthropy that we'll send to you also, and to send out with the report. And we go all the way down to 4 years old. There's a lot you can do with a 4-year-old that is sincerely impactful to growing them as generous humans. And so we just are working really hard to provide tools to get this number up. And not only because it helps them to be better stewards of their community, but also better stewards of the resources more broadly, right? 'Cause think about all the things you have to be able to do to be a strategic, impactful donor. All of those lessons really do translate to the wealth in a much broader context. So there's a lot of work to do here. And really, again, only 5% are leaning into the wisdom of their elders. Oh, right? The good news is coming, but we're gonna zip right past this. Okay, here's the opportunity to talk about the great wealth transfer. I know we've been talking about it for a long time, but it's now. It is really starting to hit. And I've already given you the homework around your planned giving program. And if you're not asking, somebody else is. $18 trillion is the latest Cerulli data I've seen, is the amount that's flowing to nonprofit organizations, already earmarked. And a lot of that will go to private foundations and donor advised funds, but a lot of it's going to go straight to operating charities as well. So you really have got to be out there hyping your planned giving program and really stewarding your planned giving donors. I mean, love them like you would any other donor, because they can change it. And it's not ever too early to start. I mean, a young professional will have a 401k or a retirement account, charitable beneficiaries there, boom. You start making your first will when you're 40. You start adding charitable beneficiaries when you're 50. Do not wait until they're in their 80s and 90s to be having planned giving conversations, because it's happened already. And a lot of times it's set in and forget it, and not always. So that's why the stewardship is so important. But to put that $18 trillion in context, the highest estimate I have read around the assets in the philanthropic sector right now is $8 trillion. 8, that's the highest. I've seen 4, I've seen 5, 8's the highest I've ever seen. 18 trillion coming on top of that. It's seismic. It's gonna change everything. So you've got to lean into your planned giving program, and we'll talk more about that. Okay, all right. I'm gonna take a breath for a second before I go into a big rant about the 19% of affluent Americans who are not giving. It's on this slide. Take a breath, okay. All right. So the good news about this is it's pretty clear what's going on here. It's this top bar. Remember I told you that the accredited investor, this is not a billionaire's report. I mean, you could have $200,000 in income and have a number of children and student debt and be saving for your first home, and obviously you can get that would be very hard to prioritize philanthropy. And the numbers bear that out. So that top bar says, my priority was taking care of my family. That was my priority. And 45% said that didn't give, say that was a reason why they didn't give. Just 9 years ago, that was 27%, right? Well, because also inflation, like $200,000 meant something different 9 years ago than it does today. And so, look, this is a judgment-free zone. Like, I get that. We get it. However, there are reasons here that nonprofits can meet the objection. For example, number 2 and number 4, I did not have a connection to an organization. Wait for it. I was not asked. I wasn't asked. These are people that could, on average, have millions of dollars in the bank and incomes that are significant. I was not asked. We can control for that. The third reason, I don't know what to do with this one. I call this the toddler response. I don't want to give to charity. What's interesting about that, remember I told you there's good news here. Younger affluent Americans are substantially less likely to say that that's a reason. Substantially less likely to say that's a reason. So that, again, that gives you an indication that 7 and 10 over time is going to increase. There's some other things in here that you want to be paying attention to. My gift would not have made a difference. This is huge. This is huge. We're going to talk more about impact reporting later. I know with the Mackenzie Scott gifts, like landing it out of the sky, you're like, does my $100 really matter? We have got to dispel that myth. Of course the $100 matters, especially the 100 and the other 100 and the next 100, right? They just have to know that they can make a difference, The giving process was too complicated. Thankfully, that's not a very popular reason why people don't give, but it is a reminder to make your giving process uncomplicated, right? Especially the rising generation. I'm sorry, they are just not gonna pull out a credit card and type it in. I got a belly laugh over that one. It's just not happening. That's not happening. So if there's not Apple Pay or whatever, forget it. I once saw research that said you had 27 seconds. I think that is a lie. I think that's a lie. So there are things that we can do, which is good news. Okay. Roughly 25% of wealthy donors are going to take one of those 5 organizations off their list. Mostly people give to the same organizations year over year. They are loyal, mostly. But some will say, we're done here. And the number one reason why is because we've badgered them. Too many requests, too closely timed, and if you've got a heavy special events platform, you're at the greatest risk of this. If you've got enough money for a really robust, mailing program, you're also at risk here. So just be intentional, and especially, again, if you are still doing a lot of special events, and I'll pause and say something about special events in a moment, a little thin in that. Just segment your donor list. I'm not coming to your golf tournament. That's not happening, ever. Gala? Yeah, I'm there for that. Especially if I can get a new dress, cute shoes for that. Golf, never. So segment, you know who your people are, make the effort. Don't mail to everybody just because you have stamps. Just don't do that. Special events. Special events, I have been preaching against special events for 10 years. That was a regular part of my repertoire. I'm changing my tune on that one, in part because of this new tax legislation, right? So with corporations, you have to spend 1% of your revenue before you ever claim a charitable deduction dollar. And you never get the benefit of that 1%. It's 0.5% coming for individuals. And so sponsorships, however, are claimed as a business deduction. It's not a charitable deduction. And so that 1% hurdle doesn't apply to the sponsorships. And now you can't just turn a granting agreement into a sponsorship. That's not how that works. But, events are very credible sponsorships. You're getting stuff in exchange, it's all kind of transactional like that. So for the corporate money, again, don't do a special event just for corporate money because it's only 7%, but it's a factor. It's not an immaterial factor. All right, I told you we were going to talk about impact. So here's what we know. 80% of donors are not monitoring or evaluating their impact, okay? Vast majority. If you ask them whether, remember, go back to the objections. I didn't give because I didn't think my gift would make a difference, right? And here you ask them, those that are giving, is my gift having an impact? 57% say, I don't know. I want to be a low impact donor. So no one ever said that. And yet they have no idea. Okay, and here's another place where I've really changed my understanding. I should say my understanding has evolved. Okay, the number one reason why, or how people get their information about whether their gift has had the impact they intended is from the nonprofit, right? And so 57% say they don't know. And so in my little baby philanthropy brain, I said, oh, well that must be because the nonprofits aren't telling them. Raise your hand if you have an impact report. Yes, everybody. So it's not that you're not telling them, but they are not hearing you. They are not hearing you. And so you've got to be more intentional about different strategies to get them to absorb the information. The first thing I would say, the only thing I'll say, is don't make it so hard. Don't use your jargon that only you understand what that means. You may be trying to professionalize it so it seems important, but you've got to use plain language. And it's got to be so simple. You should be able to put your impact on a postcard with simple charts. And by the way, that infographic, pin that to the top of your Instagram feed, please, so people can just go there and see it. I'm not going to tell you to go all in on TikTok because it's so labor intensive. Oh my gosh, feeding that beast is really hard. However, if you want young donors, best I can tell, they're using it like it's a Google search bar. I mean, they really go there for information. So think about it. Maybe you can get an intern, somebody who's digital native, I don't know, and give them a lot of freedom. Don't try to micromanage that situation. You do have to feed the beast. You have to feed the beast. But I know that you're doing it. I know that you're collecting information. I know that you're using it to learn and iterate and do your work better. And I know that you've got a report, but you've got to use more creative ways to get it into their brains. Because they want to create impact. I mean, that's obviously why they're doing what they're doing. This is what is important after they make a contribution. And if you know me at all, you've heard me say this before, but I feel like every time I give this presentation, I have to say it again. Please don't shoot the messenger, okay, on this overhead stuff. I actually tried to advocate to get this question out of the survey because I didn't want to give some suggestion that it was a good response, right? But the number one thing they care about are whether you have reasonable expenditures on administration and fundraising. So I'm primarily sharing this research to you as nonprofit leaders, right? With the expectation that you're going to use this to decode the motivations and strategies of donors to inspire greater generosity. We also use this research with donors to help them to benchmark their giving, understand best practices in giving. And so when we're with donors, I promise you that I use this data point to go on a full rant, soapbox and all, sermon complete around the overhead myth and how the scarcity mentality that we impose on nonprofits is damaging for the leaders. It doesn't help advance the mission. I got your backs on this topic. I really do. I wish we could get a little mini Dan Pilata in every room so they understand, right? I totally have your back on this. An example is that when we're training our donors how to use a Form 990 to assess organizational health, we take them to the compensation section. And we say to them, if you see compensation that is too low, it can be a red flag, right? That they are imposing too much on their people, don't have strong success, especially with founder-led organizations, where these founders are really living on that psychic income. Really not paid market, because they've just got a personal passion and it carries them. And that will never work in succession. And so, we really do train them. It's very unlikely that you're going to see overcompensation on a 990. It happens. It happens. That's why we've got intermediate sanctions rules from the IRS, but it's very rare. And we are using this to coach our donors, I promise you. Okay. This is fascinating to me. We ask how they rank their own expertise around philanthropy. Do you think you're a novice? Do you think you're somewhat knowledgeable? Or do you think you're an expert? I mean, these are affluent people that are doing things in their professions and whatever. And the humility, only 4% say they're experts. Only 4%. So for nonprofits, this is a huge window of opportunity for you. Because when you invest in their expertise, their giving skyrockets. If you compare a novice's giving to an expert's giving, experts give 6 times more. 6 times more than a non-expert. It's huge. They're also more likely to monitor the impact of their giving, more likely to have a giving vehicle, but most importantly for our purposes, they are giving substantially more. And so using this giving season, particularly around these tax law changes and things that they probably really not understanding, that source of information is really, really, really beneficial. So other barriers to charitable giving, number one is deciding what they care about. So again, there are a lot of blank canvases out there where you can get them excited about your mission because they've been so busy building businesses, raising families, doing whatever things, that they haven't really paused to understand their values, to know where they can plug in meaningfully in the community. They want to know more about how to identify a volunteer opportunity. So let's make that really easy because, spoiler alert, the really good news in this research report is around volunteering. Great encouraging news around volunteering. But let's talk a little bit more about planned giving. I'm keeping my eye on the time because I want questions for sure. Okay, so planned giving and gift planning, I should say. We think about planned giving as being testamentary at death. Gift planning is being more intentional about how you give also during your lifetime. And there is, take on your role as educator and take it on quickly, because we know that in 2024, the market was humming. Am I right, John? Good year. Got a thumbs up. Andre, am I right? Thumbs up. Humming the market. And still, 94% are just giving cash and checks and credit cards. Only 4% are giving publicly traded securities and missing all of the tax benefits that come from a long-term appreciated asset. And so we've got to make it easier for them, more visible to them, how to give more strategically during their lifetime, as well as thinking about these planned gifts. Most of the cash is coming from personal accounts, but there also are using private foundations and donor advised funds. I would like to have a little mini moment on donor advised funds. Anybody thinking about donor advised funds? Wondering about donor advised funds? I saw a hand go up. Maybe someone might jump out of their chair back there. And so let me tell you what I think about donor advised funds, and you tell me whether you agree. Okay. I think donor advised funds are one of the most flexible, powerful, convenient, hassle-free ways to give. Absolutely. Okay, I think I got to name it. I got to name it in the front row. And here's the problem. Donor advised funds are so maligned. I mean, all these headlines around the dark money of philanthropy. And donor advised funds? Donor advised fund holders are the first responders to philanthropy. Do I have any people that work at staffed, nonprofit, grant-making foundations here? Well, you would agree. It takes a minute to be a new grantee for a private foundation that's staffed. Not talking about family foundations, but professionalized. I mean, they've got a process, they take applications, and they review them, and they come for a site visit, and there's just a lot. There's a lot involved. However, if you are a community foundation donor advised fund holder, and something happens, Hurricane Maria, whatever, you do this. You pick up that phone, you go to the app, you got a few clicks, boom, 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 done, you're there. Phenomenal. However, if you want to know how to access donor advised fund holders' generosity, it is often not by going to the sponsor. You are different because you're a community foundation, you convene, you bring people together, and you can play. If for the institutional, attached to financial services firms, don't send a thank you letter to the Bank of America Charitable Gift Fund. We didn't recommend that distribution. There was a human that pulled out their phone and made that recommendation. So the most important people that you should be talking to are your prospective donors and understanding how they give. I have observed, I don't have hard data on this point, but I have observed that for some of our clients, their big decision in December is how to invest in their donor advice fund. Like that's their year-end contribution. So call those people in Q1, right? I mean, in the first quarter, maybe then they're thinking about, okay, now that it's there, how do I want to think about, my strategy for giving to the organizations? All this chatter about no mandatory minimum distribution, this money's being warehoused in donor advised funds, take that off the list. Over 20% is granted from donor advised funds every year. Foundations that have a mandatory minimum distribution requirement, we just did a significant research report with the National Center for Family Philanthropy, and the vast majority hover between 5 and 8%, compared to the 21% from donor advised funds. So, at minimum, just understand whether your donors and prospective donors are using a donor advised fund. It's often not an either or. It's a yes and. I have a donor advised fund, I have a family foundation, and just understand their preferences around vehicles, timing, and by all means, good data hygiene. Just good data hygiene. Make sure that soft credit lands where it's supposed to on the individual account, right? No donor records for the sponsor, right? You want to make sure that you're really communicating with your donors in the right way by having the right record keeping. Okay. All right. More on gift planning. For the plan giving program that you are going to prioritize and supercharge in your notes with the stars and the underlining and the circling and the highlighting, don't overcomplicate it. Do not make it hard. It does not need to be hard, okay? Bequests. If you only focus on bequests and qualified charitable distributions, you will have done most of the work. I often see, particularly for like newer fundraisers, them getting like paralyzed around planned giving because they don't understand the nuance and complexity of split interest trusts. Take it off the list. Take it off the list. That level of complexity is really between them and their wealth advisor, their lawyer, and their accountant. You are not going to be advising a donor about whether they need a flip cred or an impress. That's just not your job. And I loved that when Fab said that I was a recovering lawyer. Okay. Any lawyers in the room? Okay. Are any recovering lawyers in the room? Amen. I know, we're high-fiving. Only non-lawyers ever ask me if I miss practicing law. Anyway, so we just don't get bogged down in that. There's no need for it. If you went, ooh, what's she talking about with qualified charitable distributions? Take some notes. QCD, qualified charitable distribution. We've already talked about how you can ask a young professional to add you as a charitable beneficiary to their retirement account. There is so much money in this country sitting in retirement accounts. And with the market humming, they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it is a really important place for gift planning, both during lifetime with qualified charitable distributions. If you have donors who are 70 and a half, they now can give, it's up to about $110,000 straight from their retirement account to you. Okay, they cannot take it because then they have to pay taxes on it. But it's tax-free if it goes straight to the organization. So find somebody that will do this for you and then promote the bejesus out of it for your year-end giving strategy, giving season communication strategies. It's very, very powerful. It's indexed for inflation, it just keeps getting bigger, it's huge. And also for planned giving. through these charitable beneficiaries. You don't need a lawyer. You do typically have to have the spouse like notarize the thing that it's okay, but no lawyers, and so it's even easier than a bequest, and substantial assets that are sitting in those retirement accounts. So don't overcomplicate it. Don't overcomplicate it. Okay. As you would expect, the 5 million plus households are more likely to have a giving vehicle. 48% either have one now or are planning to establish one in the future. So it's a great question to ask your donors. You know, what other organizations are you supporting? Do you have a giving vehicle? How are you involving your children and grandchildren in their giving? Would you like for me to put together a volunteer activity where you can bring your kids and grandkids on site to our organization? And just some of the questions you can ask, informed by the research. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up here. Let me tell you what's gonna happen over the next 6 minutes. And I want you to be thinking about your questions and comments. Okay, so I'm gonna do 3 more bits of information. The first is on other ways affluent Americans are using their money to achieve their philanthropic goals, other than traditional charitable giving. Okay, we're gonna talk about that. Impact investing, conscious consumerism, and political giving. Okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit about trust. Not good news. Oh, I'm gonna talk about volunteering also. Oh, sorry, buckle up, I've got 10 minutes. All right, here we go. All right, quickly, impact investing. Declining in popularity. It surged during the pandemic. That's when you align your values with your investment portfolio, okay? Like an easy example would be for some of our faith clients, they don't want the sin stocks, right? No booze, no tobacco, no gambling, none of that in the portfolio. That's a values alignment that's impact investing. Sometimes you hear it called sustainable investing, investing, sometimes you hear that, not as much lately. It's declining in popularity. But what's important to know about it is 30% of people who are engaging in impact investing are using it as a substitute for traditional charitable giving, all or part. So when you look at that declining donor participation rate, the substitution effect, it's not a huge impact. I mean, the biggest one obviously is pressure on your finances and needing to take care of your family, but the substitution effect it's a variable that you have to pay attention to. The other is conscious consumerism. Conscious consumerism. That's when you buy goods and services from a company that has values that align with yours. Almost all women and almost all young people, sometimes or always, take this into consideration when they're making their purchasing decisions. But here again, about 25% have a substitution effect. So you might buy if you care about the visually impaired and the blind, you might buy your glasses at Warby Parker and then not make a contribution to guide dogs for the blind, as a for example. Political giving, 2024 was a big year. Only 1 in 4 were actually engaged in political giving, and there's a much less of a substitution effect that comes from political giving. Only 14%, so not as significant. Okay, who's ready for some good news? You ready for some good news?
Yes.
Okay, volunteering, major rebound. So before the pandemic, 50% were actively volunteering, which is great, out there in the communities, aligning their time and their talent with their treasure. And understandably, in 2020, that went down to 30%, and we're inching back. We're now up to 43%. Back in 2022, people were still on their sofas. We were all still wearing stretchy pants, slippers, wasn't wearing these shoes, but we're getting back out again. So that's great, that's good news. And what's good news about that is, there's good news, I'll keep it, a little spoiler alert. We know that, not a monolith, women, substantially more likely to volunteer. But remember I told you there were indicators about, while only 7 in 10 young people are giving now, there are indicators that they're going to give more later. Look at this one. Equally as likely to volunteer as the older folks. right? No, you would think that number would be a lot higher because the retirees, right, really do lean into volunteering, and right spot on, same. And so they're showing us, like, think about how busy their lives are, right? Building careers, often families, like there's just a lot of competition for the minutes. And they're already prioritizing volunteering, which just tells you that when they have greater financial resources, they will be generous. So they do all kinds of different things. A lot of direct service, sorting things, ushering, worship attendance, fundraising, serving on boards, all of it. We do have it's fairly significant age gap though with the board service, and I'm here to tell you, if you don't have millennials and Gen Z represented on your board, it really is at your peril for a number of reasons. The obvious, they're about to be rich. And they're not tolerating transactional fundraising. They really want to build relationships. So is that the right time to make a friend is before you need one. So come on, hop to it, get them on your board. But also, they're digital natives. Like, they just can see things strategically that us old people can't see and can't know. I mean, there's generational wisdom with these young people. And don't bring one on. Do not tokenize the young person. Bring on 2 or 3. But really, it's a priority. I'd write that down. I'd write that one down. I would. This is big. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Much more likely to volunteer with their family. Remember, only 15% were giving with their kids and grandkids, but the 28% are with other family members. So that's awesome. Important. Remember, you're motivated to give. It's all about you. Your personal values, your interests, your experiences. Look at this. You volunteer because you see a need. Huge door to bring in potential new donors. And look at this. Look at what volunteers do. They give twice as much as non-volunteers. 2.5 times, really. So really, volunteering is a gateway to generosity. So a lot of organizations, especially because like in the pandemic, you kind of had to live without your volunteers for a while there, have slowly and quietly dismantled their volunteer programs because it's a hassle. You gotta get them in, you gotta schedule them, you gotta train them, you gotta really tell your insurance people what you're doing with volunteers so you get the right coverage, that costs more. Like, there are a lot of factors, I understand, that make volunteer programs seem like the juice isn't worth the squeeze. But this data point tells you everything you need to know, especially with women. Remember, women are more likely to volunteer. And I told you already that we find more joy when we give more, but that act of giving more almost always is tethered to a volunteer leadership experience. So bring them in, because the future of philanthropy is female, and the future is now. All right, now we're really getting to the end. We're getting to the end. 2 more slides, and then it's yours, your time. Okay. Good news, bad news. Let me just start with the bad news. I'm not telling you something you don't already know. We don't trust anybody or anything. Eroding trust across the board, right? And that's true not only of nonprofits, it's all institutions. And even individuals, right? Governments, all branches, businesses, all sizes. The good news is the most trusted of all of these, including individuals and the rising generation, at 20%, are nonprofit organizations. That's great, right? You should feel really great that you are, like, look at the bottom, large corporations, 5%, Congress, 5%, right? But nonprofits get 25%, right? They're 4 times more likely to have a great deal of trust in nonprofits. And you should really own that. Own that in terms of celebrating your impact. Again, own it celebrating your expertise. Because remember, as important as it is to have volunteers that give 2.5 times more, remember about those expert philanthropists, 6 times more than the novices, right? So leverage your place, bless you, leverage your place of authority to really lean into helping them understand your mission, your impact, and also teach them some things about being a sophisticated philanthropist. And one thing we do agree on is that charitable giving, and especially volunteering, make us happy, right? They had taken this one out for a while, and when I came back, they're like, well, I mean, it's so obvious. I'm like, well, I know it's obvious. Experientially, it's obvious. But I want board members to have this data point, right? Because I want board members to know that when you're out helping with the fundraising, which you must do, right? The ability for the organization to meet ambitious fundraising goals is capped at the engagement and the leadership of the board. So you must do this. And just know that when you make that match, again, remember, it's not sales. Nobody's like twisting anybody's arms here. That's not what we're going for. Those transactional gifts will blow up eventually, especially in the form of quid pro quo. You twist somebody's arm too hard for fundraising as a volunteer, and they're gonna get you when their campaign comes. But if you really find that alignment and that joyful giving, it's good for everybody. It's good for the organization and for the donor and for the volunteer. So I think having this data point is really important and encouraging. So we will send you the report. We'll send you the 5 stages of philanthropy. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you really like the data, because I do put the data in my feed. And I hope that you've got some questions or some comments. Yeah, and I can repeat it also.
So this question is really geared towards appealing to the digital DNA of the Zillennials, as I call them. So is it important, as you talk about that next generation and trying to appeal to that group, to make sure you're accommodating things like cryptocurrency and digital things in your, gift acceptance policies and things like that?
John, thank you for the question. So I will answer that question in 2 parts. Part number 1 is, do you need to be flexible for the Zillennials and everybody in what gifts that you will accept? And the answer is yes. The data is unambiguous. People that are only accepting cash are losing ground, whereas people that are accepting complex assets, and I mean, we really should not be calling appreciated securities complex assets, because it's not that hard, although there are some things on the back end. You will increase your fundraising often exponentially, particularly if you're accepting real estate. The data on that is, I forget the exact percentage, but on the chart, it's much higher if you're accepting real estate. But thank you for that very astute nod to the gift acceptance policy. Also homework. If you've not updated your gift acceptance policy in the last 3 years, it's time. And the benefits to that exercise are, 1, hopefully you're more flexible in what you can accept. And you don't have to accept everything directly, right? I mean, you can work with a third party on cryptocurrency, for example,
to help you liquidate that asset. And that may be in your best interest to do so. But also, that board approves the gift acceptance policy. And so in that process of using your, either your governance committee or potentially your finance committee or both of them to update your gift acceptance policy, you're educating them. And now they're thinking about their own assets that they could bring to bear. And then ultimately goes to board and board approval. So it's a very healthy exercise,
not only for the fiduciary part, but also for the fundraising part. It really can be a very powerful exercise in solicitation. Okay. What else we got?
Are there other questions? Yes, right over here.
Hi, Dr. Nini. My name is Lashante, and our organization is Snapshots by Leilani. And I just want to know, are donors shifting towards supporting smaller community-based nonprofits? We are very small, we're very new. We just want to know.
So it depends. It depends. We saw quite a bit of that, kind of over the last 5 years. It really depends on the donor. But I think for many philanthropists, in my experience working for them, they're looking for ways to make outsized impact. And so for smaller organizations, it's that whole thing, like, does my gift make a difference? And so for a small organization, your gift does go a lot further than it might at a larger organization. When you can also provide them an opportunity to get involved as a volunteer, especially for newer organizations, it can really have the benefit of bringing them closer, inspiring them to give more, and also can help you, right? If you are just getting started. But thank you for your leadership and thank you for the question. It's a great one. What else we got? Yeah.
Lorraine Deserines with the Urban League of Palm Beach County, and I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. We have been around for 53 years, but you just mentioned earlier the Mackenzie Scott grantees.
Yes.
While that has been a huge blessing to our entity, it's also been a little bit difficult to navigate as far as philanthropists and grants and donors go, where the response we get is, "But you guys were one of the recipients, why are you still asking for money?"
Right.
Not really understanding that obviously it doesn't keep us going forever, even though our administration has been very wise with the use of it. So how do we navigate that?
So I think what I've seen for our clients that have been Mackenzie Scott grantees that has been very helpful, and you're a little bit further away from it unless you're in this last round, so you maybe missed this opportunity. For people that aspire to have a Mackenzie Scott grant, who would love to have a Mackenzie Scott grant? Round of applause for Mackenzie Scott. All hail Mackenzie Scott. And I've not dug into this latest round, but I'm excited to do that. So if you get one, obviously the communication plan immediately is so important. I mean, what we have seen is there's a halo effect that comes from it. So some of our clients that receive Mackenzie Scott money actually get more money because now there's the visibility that if her team deemed you worthy, it's like this gold seal of approval. But also creating a strategic planning task force of your top donors to help you figure out what to do with the money can help have buy-in to kind of the longer term needs of the organization. There's more transparency, a greater understanding. For people who are wondering what's happened to all this Mackenzie Scott money, I will say the Center for Effective Philanthropy did a great research report on it. And the number one thing people did is they paid their people right, staffed appropriately for their current mission, and then created long-term endowments and other long-term funds, which donors love that, right? Look, donors don't want to bail boats. They want to sail ships, right? And so coming from that position of strength is important. But you do sometimes have to go one by one. And sometimes, for some people, it's just an excuse. Again, because it was a transactional relationship anyway, and they're sort of like looking for a way to winnow the list. And what they tell you the reason isn't always the reason. What else? Yeah.
So an interesting trend that I've noticed, there are these mass scale campaigns that have these odd dollar amounts monthly.
And
I think we've all seen these campaigns where there's been these large scale requests and it's odd numbers, $11 a month, $19 a month, that's where and they're everywhere. Are those effective?
Absolutely. Monthly giving really adds up. And the younger people love it because they don't have the flexibility to write one big check and also set it and forget it, right? I mean, until that credit card expires, this thing's gonna just roll. Yes, monthly giving programs are great, yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Nikki with Breakthrough Miami, and I actually was really interested in the figure around the corporate giving is only 7% of the portfolio, and you mentioned about sort of if you're looking at staffing, right, not to over-index on corporate and foundation professionals. So if you're a small shop and you only have one or maybe two people, that becomes time, right? And we think about that in time. And I was thinking, obviously corporate and foundation grants take a lot of time from us. And when you all are reviewing with your clients, if you're reviewing an organization with a client determining, in my history, I'm thinking that if we're showing that we've got 50% coming from individuals and 50% coming from corporations and foundations and government, that's showing you that we have a diverse portfolio and that we're sustainable. given that that's only 7% from corporate, I'm just curious about how you review organizations and what would you recommend? And do you think that those amounts should actually be lower? And does that tell you we should be spending more time on individuals?
So I love that you're over-indexed on corporations and foundations, right? That means you're doing a really great job with those asks, and it shows you've got an opportunity with individuals. But I will say there's no one-size-fits-all. Like I was working with a client, over the several years that had only corporate support. And it's an organization that has a mission that's sort of adjacent to the workplace. And I was really trying to encourage them to think more expansively, especially for some, it's like the board's all CEOs. Like, what about some of those retired CEOs that can't get you the corporate dollars anymore? And is there a way that you can build up your individual giving? And for them, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, right? Because of their mission, because of the way they're set up, because of the way their board is comprised, like they're just an engine for corporate. So while it's only 7% overall, for some organizations, that is appropriately the lifeblood. But I will say the risk with corporate giving is that it can be a little cyclical, right? And the corporations often kind of move en masse. Like they get behind whatever the community priority is, which is great. It's responsive to the needs of the community. But the individual donors can be more loyal, right? And so, really not losing sight of the importance of that diversified fundraising portfolio is important. I hope that's helpful.
One more question.
One more question? And I'll stick around for a while, but I am going to sit down.
I was thinking about differences between funds for operations versus capital, and if there are any insights there you'd like to share.
That is not covered in this research, but we did see a swing toward general operating, unrestricted, as part of that trust-based philanthropy movement, and the pendulum's starting to swing the other way again. It started with the government and having, really firm requirements around evaluation on that side, and just greater. Again, they want to see impact, and whether it's contribution or attribution. I just see the pendulum beginning to swing. Now, people love capital. A lot of people love capital because of the naming rights that go along with that. But again, it's very donor specific. It is frustratingly hard to raise money for endowment outside of the higher ed context, in my experience. Because we know, talk about revenue diversification, our clients, and we're in the investment management business. I mean, I should acknowledge the only reason why we get to do the Bank of America study of philanthropy is because we're the #1 outsourced chief investment office for both foundations and nonprofits in terms of AUM. Our commitment to serving philanthropic organizations by helping them to steward their investment portfolios is sincere and enduring. And that's the only reason why we get to do this. It's an extension of that model. And so every day we see the power of endowments, right? Just that engine, for sustainability for organizations, to help them weather the good and the bad times. And yet donors have a hard time getting their heads around that. Planned giving is an awesome way to boost endowments, because these gifts almost always come without restrictions and are substantially larger than current gifts. And so using them to seed and to grow endowments is key. And so I'm going to end on planned giving. Underlined, stars, highlighted. Let me know how it goes.
Thank you so much. And let me thank all of you for saying yes to the invitation. It's great to have you here, and I hope that you have actionable insights that will inform your work as you work with your donors and your clients. Thank you all very much for coming.